Avianca Flight 52 is in trouble. The crew is exhausted. They're over New York City and almost out of fuel.
Are we cleared to land now?
Yes, sir, we are clear to land.
Tell me things louder because I'm not hearing it.
They're cleared to land. Soon the nightmare will be over.
Gear down.
Glide slow!
Icing rate 500 feet.
The captain desperately searches for the runway at Kennedy Airport,
Lights!
but he can't find it.
The runway, where is it?
I don't see it. I don't see it.
Now they're battling violent wind shear.
This is the wind shear.
They're going to crash.
With the landing gear up, landing gear up!
The plane has hardly a drop of fuel left. They cannot land. Flight 52 is about to crash somewhere over New York. How could that happen? Even the world's finest air crash detectives will never agree about who is to blame.
Relevance of testimony.
Southwest of Kennedy Airport, with a track brought up. What's motivation?
Go 106 to Main Street, north to base.
January the 25th, 1990. Air traffic controllers have been nervously tracking a massive low-pressure system approaching the northeast coast of America.
There was a system moving through the Great Lakes, moving east. There was a couple other systems converging. And a lot of times they'll converge in the New York area there, and the whole northeast will go down.
The weather is already near the safe minimum to land a plane. Flights will have to be cancelled or delayed. The terminals will be choked with thousands of angry passengers. Despite the terrible weather, the air traffic managers in Washington, D.C. order controllers at Kennedy Airport in New York to set a high landing rate. Air travel is vital, and they're under tremendous pressure to delay or cancel as few flights as possible.
There's pressure because that's the business they're in. The business is moving passengers from A to B. That's what the airlines are paid, and the controllers are paid to help that work.
Management in Washington, D.C. is pressuring New York to take on more flights than they feel is safe. Despite the weather, they want them to land 33 aircraft per hour.
We don't like it. We're going to have the worst possible conditions for landing aircraft at Kennedy Airport. We can't use runway 13.
We have to use runway 22 because of the conflicts with other airports.
And because of the winds, we don't like the rate of 33 an hour.
33 is it, and you'll take it.
Scores of overseas flights with thousands of passengers are already on their way. They have to land somehow.
What are we going to do with foreign traffic?
We'll just give them airborne holes.
Well, we know we're going to have wind shear and missed approaches, and this is going to be a very bad day.
I've got very bad vibes about this day.
No. 33. You'll shake it.
And that set the scenario at about 7 or 8 in the morning before we left Medellin. At 7 or 8 in the morning, the scenario was set for this accident to happen.
But within the next few hours, fog and low clouds have closed the main runway at JFK. Now, whatever their bosses say, the controllers won't be able to land 33 aircraft an hour. "2,400 miles to the south in Colombia, it's a warm, sunny day with not a cloud in the sky. Avianca Flight 52 is now boarding passengers for New York. Among them, Miriam and Luis Montoya and their 2 young daughters.
I remember during that day in the morning, before we boarded the flight, I talked to a friend that was going to pick us up at the airport in New York. He told us the weather conditions were bad. The temperature was very low, and it was rainy, and it was going to be foggy.
After a short business trip, Nestor Zarata is traveling home to New York.
I received a telephone call telling me that if I could be in the airport in a half an hour and not ask any questions or request anything, I would get on the direct flight to New York.
In the cockpit, flight engineer Matthias Moyano monitors the loading of over 13,000 pounds of fuel, making a total of 80,000 pounds. Enough for the journey, plus an extra 2 hours flying time.
Avianca 052 Heavy, request clearance for takeoff, runway 11.
Just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Avianca 52 takes off from Medellin with its maximum allowable fuel load. The Colombian airliner heads north for the United States with 158 passengers and crew. By early evening, deteriorating weather has made flight operations at JFK appalling.
Continue to the left, heading 230 vectors and holding for Cameron again.
With no way of turning back the overseas flights, aircraft are forced to circle round endlessly, waiting to land.
Turn left. There is a wind shear alert on final at 1,500 feet. Turn left.
Controllers work frantically to keep track of the growing number of aircraft now in the skies over New York.
251, you are clear to land.
When Mother Nature gets involved, problems develop. The tension gets higher, the pressure gets higher, decisions become more critical.
At JFK, any idea how long those delays are going to be?
I talked to someone else over there, no idea.
I'm holding over here. Delay's indefinite due to the weather. The traffic's missing the approaches. They're going around. I just can't give you a good answer. Your guess would be as good as mine. That's the best I can tell you.
JFK Airport in New York now only has one runway for landing, and aircraft are queuing up to use it. In the near blackout conditions, several planes have to abort their landings, which only adds to the delays. On Flight 52, they know none of this. The crew neither receives nor requests the weather for New York or for their alternate airport, Boston.
In this case, Avianca 52 had the capability of calling several different stations or could have called their own dispatch operation in Miami and got an update on the weather. We don't really have any evidence that they checked with anyone to get the updated weather for JFK and their alternate Boston.
It's inconceivable to me that someone with a responsibility of other people's lives would fly into a deteriorating condition without checking about, hey, do we have a way out of this place?
Avianca 52 enters the airspace near Norfolk, Virginia. After 4 hours in the air, New York City is now less than 40 minutes away. 51-year-old Captain Laureano Caviedes is a seasoned pilot who's been flying with Avianca for 27 years. But his English is poor. All communications with air traffic control will be handled by the 28-year-old co-pilot, Mauricio Klotz. The third man in the cockpit, flight engineer Matthias Moyano, is experienced, but like co-pilot Klotz, he has only 4 months of flight time in the 707.
They were a highly experienced flight crew who had been into New York several times previously on behalf of Avianca. So they were familiar with the route and the procedures, and highly experienced pilots.
Washington, good evening. Avianca 052 Heavy, flight level 370.
Avianca 052 Heavy, Washington Center, roger. Avianca 052, I'd like you to make a right 360-degree turn. And I need you to get a pencil ready for holding instructions at Norfolk.
Okay, 360-degree right turn at Norfolk, Avianca 052 Heavy.
Avianca 052, you ready to copy your holding instructions?
Go ahead, sir.
All right, Avianca 052, you are cleared to the Norfolk VORTAC. Hold south on 174 with right turns and 20-mile legs.
Flight 52's troubles are about to begin. They're being diverted out over the Atlantic Ocean near Norfolk, Virginia, and placed in a holding pattern. Here, the aircraft will fly an elliptical racetrack pattern while it waits for further instructions from air traffic control. They don't know about the bad weather ahead, but with enough fuel for more than 2 hours of flying, there's no cause for alarm. This area in the northeast corridor of the United States is one of the most congested airspaces in the world. Incoming traffic from overseas is routinely directed through a pipeline of controllers before being cleared to land at one of 3 major airports in the New York area: JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark. Tonight, Avianca 52 will come under the direction of more than 6 controllers, each of whom is trying to get the aircraft now circling over New York safely down on the ground.
We just got off the line. It's indefinite holding at this time.
080. We just had 3 missed approaches on 22, right? We just went below the minimums. We just had 4 misses on 22, right? Which is our primary runway.
The visibility is getting worse, and it's worsening.
All right, how many are you holding?
Well, we're still holding the 12 or 13 we had earlier. We're expecting some pretty lengthy delays in another hour, so.
While air traffic controllers try to cope with the increasing backlog of flights, Avianca Flight 52 circles for 19 minutes over the Virginia coast, waiting for permission to continue its journey to New York.
Avianca 052, expedite descent through level 33. Just leave flight level 330 within 3 minutes, please.
Okay, we'll leave 330 within 3 minutes. Avianca 052 Heavy.
The Avianca jet is on its way to New York at last, but they have no idea of the trouble that awaits them. Avianca Flight 52 is on its final approach to New York, unaware that conditions for landing at JFK are barely above the safe limits to land a plane. It's a pitch-black night with heavy mist, rain, and sudden violent winds.
This is Central. I was wondering how your weather was doing up there.
It's pretty bad at this point. We got all sorts of wind shears and missed approaches.
Due to not seeing the runway?
You're still trying on a 30 rate.
Yeah, rather unsuccessfully at this point. The winds are starting to pick up. 20% of the guys attempted approaches
Went on a miss.
When the northeast goes down, it goes down. It goes down for a big area. And a lot of quick decisions have to be made. You just can't say, wait a minute, stop. Everyone's en route.
The plane has now almost used up the fuel planned for the journey and will shortly start eating into its reserves. The crew is considering diverting to their alternate airport in Boston, just 210 miles from New York.
Washington Center, Avianca 052 Heavy.
Avianca 052 Heavy, go ahead.
Do you have any information about delays to Boston?
Boston, I'll check that, sir.
Thank you.
The Washington controller asks his assistant to check on the conditions at Boston, but he gets distracted juggling other aircraft and forgets all about Avianca's request. While Flight 52 is left waiting for an answer that never comes, their precious fuel supply is slowly draining away.
Ask him about Boston again.
Did you ask about delays at Boston, or are we going to approach Kennedy?
Okay, Avianca 052, it looks as though New York Center may have to hold you for possibly up to 30 minutes.
You can expect clearance on course, just momentarily, with,
stands right now, an additional holding of at most 30 minutes. With that in mind, you want to check on an alternate airport? I believe Boston is. I'll check on Boston.
Okay. We're now descending to 190 and expecting information about Boston.
Okay, Avianca 052, I've been advised Boston is open and accepting traffic if you do need that as an alternate airport.
Okay, stand by a minute.
Flight engineer Moyano begins to calculate how much fuel they'll have after an additional 30 minutes of holding. Even before they can respond, Washington Control directs them to another holding location.
Avianca 052 Heavy, make a right turn now to intercept the Cameron 2 arrival. Cleared on course, maintain flight level 190.
Flight 52 is now off the New Jersey coast in an area known as Cameron, less than 45 miles from Kennedy Airport, but it seems as far away as ever.
During all those holding times, I was praying and trying to see where we're going to land. I mean, when we're going to be on the ground. I don't want to be here anymore.
Ladies and gentlemen, your captain. I apologize for the delay, but it appears we're going to be holding as we wait our turn to land in New York. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened, and we should have you on the ground shortly. Thank you.
There was a point where the captain announced that there was traffic in the New York City area and that we would be on hold for a while and that he would get back to us.
It will be the last communication the crew has with the passengers. Flight 52's situation now goes from bad to worse.
Avianca 052, descend and maintain 14,000.
It's handed over to the New York controllers, who even on a good day can be intimidating. And today is not a good day. There are up to 39 aircraft trying to land and dozens more on the ground waiting to take off.
Avianca 052, expect for the clearance at 0139.
Avianca 052 Heavy, roger.
Tired and frustrated, the crew of Avianca 52 continues to circle the crowded airspace over New York while they wait for clearance to land. After more than 5 hours in the air, Luis Montoya is anxious to get his wife and 2 young daughters on the ground and back to their home in Queens.
As the flight started to prolong, we started to feel uneasy. My wife was carrying the baby at all times, and we were wondering what could be happening. After all, they weren't giving us any information, and most people began to feel nervous.
New York Center finally gives the crew of Avianca 52 the message they've been waiting for.
Avianca 052 Heavy, Aviar Kennedy is 2,400 feet. Can you accept an approach?
That's an affirmative, sir.
They think they're finally in the clear. Then, calamity. The foul weather and zero visibility forces several aircraft just ahead of them to abandon their landing attempts and make a second attempt. The controllers have bad news for the Colombian airliner.
Avianca 052, continue to the left, heading 230 vectors, holding at Cameron again.
Another hold.
Okay, 230 vectors for holding at Cameron. Kennedy, Avianca 052.
Avianca 052, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. You have any estimates, sir?
Avianca 052 Heavy, I might be able to get you in right now. Stand by.
Thank you.
The crew wait silently and hope. But when the reply comes, it's more bad news.
Avianca 052, we just got off the line. It's indefinite holding at this time. So Avianca 052, turn left, heading 090, hold at Cameron, maintain 1000.
They've been held up for 48 minutes on the way here. Now they've been circling around for another 25 minutes, only a few miles from the safety of JFK Airport.
They were progressively moving toward JFK, and they were held in the air for 3 times. This certainly would put some stress on the crew as to the fact they want to go from A to B. They don't want to fly in a racetrack for an hour just holding.
At 8:55, the cockpit voice recorder begins recording the last 40 minutes of Flight 52. The crew at this stage seem resigned, or are perhaps too timid to complain. Moments later, Avianca is given more unwelcome news.
Avianca 052, expect further clearance time 0205. Expect further clearance in 20 minutes.
It's now that the stress level in the cockpit begins to rise.
0205. Well, I think we need priority. We are passing out of fuel.
Avianca 052, roger. How long can you hold and what is your alternate?
Okay, stand by a minute.
The flight engineer quickly calculates the remaining fuel.
Yes, sir, we'll be able to hold for 5 minutes. That's all we can do.
Avianca 052, roger. And what's your alternate?
We said Boston.
But it's full of traffic, I think.
Avianca 052, say your alternate again.
It was Boston, but we can't do it now. We'll run out of fuel.
Avianca 052, cleared to land at Kennedy via heading 040, maintain 1000 at speed 180.
The Avianca crew, when they felt it, they were being handed off to an approach controller now and given a heading and a lower altitude. I'm sure in their minds they thought, well, they even commented on the cockpit voice recorder, we're being handled or we're being taken care of.
It's okay if I send 4 more your way?
Casino, I'm back in the hold again. I got 4 in the stack and there's no end in sight. I can't keep you times. I'd be guessing if I did. This guy's killing me. Avianca 052 only has 5 more minutes in the hold. You gonna be able to take him, or I'll set him up to his alternate?
What is his speed now?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Holding speed.
Slow him to 180 and I'll take him.
Say again?
Slow him to 180 knots and I'll take him. You guys holding a lot?
Man, we're holding all up and down the coast.
Ah, that's good practice, man.
But in this critical handoff from one controller to the next, there is no specific mention of Avianca's critically low fuel.
Nobody told the next controller that. So the next controller, when Avianca came in on the frequency, the controller just said, right, I've got you, proceed to Kennedy, or I'm going to put you in a hold, and put him in a holding pattern over the last approach fix. The options were gone. Now the aircraft could only get into Kennedy.
Avianca, descend and maintain 7,000.
Descending to 7,000, Avianca 052 Heavy.
Avianca 052, before you go, there is a wind shear alert
On final at 1,500 feet.
Turn left, heading 090.
Left, heading 090, Avianca 052 Heavy.
The high-level wind shear was passed on early on, so he was aware of that. But the low-level wind shear below 500 feet was not passed on.
During the entire flight from Colombia, the plane's autopilot has been unusable. It was reported after the last flight, but Avianca's maintenance men failed to fix it. After more than 6 hours of flying manually, the physical and mental stress is beginning to take its toll on Captain Caviedes.
To me, it's inconceivable someone would have to fly at Boeing 707 without an autopilot. I mean, that's a high workload in smooth air.
After more than an hour and 17 minutes waiting for clearance to land, the crew of Flight 52 believe controllers on the ground are at last aware of their fuel emergency and are clearing the 707 for a priority landing. In the cabin, the flight attendants and passengers have no idea that their plane is dangerously low on fuel.
Then the go-around procedure is stating that the power be applied slowly.
In the cockpit, the crew now hastily discuss the go-around procedure, what the manual says they must do if they can't find the runway through the fog and low clouds and have to go around a second time. It's standard procedure.
Power be applied slowly and to avoid rapid accelerations and to have a minimum of nose-up attitude.
To maintain what?
Minimum nose-up attitude. That means...
Flight engineer Moyano is concerned that if the captain were to pull up the plane's nose too sharply, all the remaining fuel would slosh to the back of the tank, causing engines to stop.
Covered on fuel during the go-around. What it means is it doesn't contain fuel for feeding itself and a flameout could occur. And it is necessary to lower the nose again.
Right now we are proceeding to the airport inbound. We have 17 miles.
Roger.
This means we'll have hamburger tonight.
Avianca, descend and maintain 3,000.
Descend and maintain 3,000. Avianca 052 Heavy.
3,000 feet. They got us. They're already vectoring us.
No, they are descending us.
They are giving us priority.
Avianca 052 Heavy. Contact Kennedy Tower 119.1. Good day.
Only minutes before landing, Flight 52 is handed off to a JFK tower controller whose shift is about to end.
Avianca 052 Heavy, Kennedy Tower 22 left. You are number 3 following 727 traffic on a 9-mile final.
Avianca 052
Heavy, roger.
Can I lower the landing gear yet?
No, I think it's too early. If we lower the landing gear, we have to maintain a very high nose attitude.
So desperately low is their fuel that the first officer wants to delay putting down the landing gear, which will increase the aircraft's drag, requiring more power and using more of what little fuel they have remaining.
I was so happy. For me, it was like a joy. I mean, we're going to land soon, and this is going to be end.
Avianca 052, what is your airspeed?
Avianca 052, 140 knots.
Avianca 052, can you increase your airspeed 10 knots?
10?
Okay, 10 knots, increasing.
Increase.
10 knots more.
Tell me things louder because I'm not hearing it. Lower the gear.
Gear down.
Avianca 052, 22 left, wind 190 at 20, cleared to land.
Clear to land, Avianca 052 Heavy. Wind check, please.
190 at 20.
With the weather deteriorating and flying on fumes, the crew of Flight 52 will have only one chance of getting their 149 passengers safely on the ground.
Avianca 052, say airspeed.
145 knots.
Are we cleared to land now?
Yes, sir, we are clear to land.
Stand by. Flaps 50. Landing checklist complete.
It was extremely important that Avianca 52 landed on their first approach JFK. The voice recorder revealed that the captain was certainly quite concerned about the fuel state, and he was talking aggressively with the first officer, putting out flaps, getting the airplane configured.
The flight engineer had to know they were out of fuel. And when they came in for their first approach, it was time for the flight engineer to say, this is the only approach we're going to be able to make. And he didn't.
Give me 50.
Flaps 50 now.
All set for landing.
Standing by for lights. Slightly below glide slope. 1,000 feet above field. Instruments cross-checked, slightly below.
Stand by for lights.
Stand by.
The wind is slightly from the left, 190 with 20. Below glide slope.
With about 10 minutes of fuel remaining and just 2 miles from the runway, Flight 52 finds itself flying into violent wind shear, forcing them to slow the plane down.
They were getting like 60 knots of wind on the nose. And then as they descended on down through about 500 feet to the ground, they were down to 20 knots. So that's 40 knot change and 1,000 feet of elevation. That's a lot.
This is the wind shear.
Now the wind changes direction. It's pressing them down towards the ground.
Glide slope!
Glide slope.
Sink rate 500 feet.
Glide slope.
The captain desperately searches for the runway, but it's shrouded in low clouds and fog.
Terrain.
Lights!
The runway, where is it?
I don't see it. I don't see it.
The plane's warning system is telling them that they're about to crash.
Sink rate 500 feet.
Just 2 miles from touchdown, Flight 52 has been caught in violent wind shear. To save the plane, Captain Caviedes applies full throttle, burning up more of the plane's precious fuel.
Give me the landing gear up. Landing gear up.
The airplane was about 200 feet above the ground, about 2 miles from the runway, which was well below the glide slope and very dangerous. So the airplane almost crashed on its first approach.
When you get a missed approach, now it changes the whole ball game.
Request another traffic pattern.
Executing a missed approach. Avianca 052 Heavy.
The operation of pulling the plane up in the missed approach was a very violent one. It was a very steep climb. So we were all thrown back by gravity towards the back of our seats.
Something's going on here. Anything, we're going to crash. This is terrible. I mean, we start praying, but then I pass out. I couldn't handle it anymore.
As Captain Caviedes pulls back hard on the yoke to climb to safety, the 707's remaining fuel is forced to the back of the tank and away from the fuel pumps.
You cannot accelerate the aircraft forward rapidly, and you shouldn't pitch it rapidly.
Smooth with the nose. Smooth with the nose.
You have less than 7,000 pounds. You have to be very careful, or you can slosh that fuel to the back of the tank and unport the inlet to the engines.
Flight 52's violent climb to safety has both frightened and infuriated the passengers.
My baby Daniela also started to feel uneasy and began to cry. We began to get the feeling that something was about to happen.
I buckled up with the baby just in case there was a problem. She's very little, and I was concerned that my weight could have crushed her. I had her in my arms, and we began to say the Lord's Prayer.
I don't know what happened with the runway. I didn't see it.
I didn't see it either.
I didn't see it.
Avianca 052, you were making a left turn, correct, sir?
Tell him we are in emergency.
2,000 feet. That's right, to 180 on
The heading, and we'll try once again. We are running out of fuel.
Okay.
What did he say?
I already advised him that we are going to attempt again.
Advise him we are in emergency. Do you tell him?
Yes, sir, I already advised him.
But the tower controller, at the end of his shift, transfers Avianca 52 to his counterpart in approach control. They'll have to begin all over again.
Contact approach on 118.4.
Approach, Avianca 052 heavy. We just missed a missed approach and we are maintaining 2,000.
Flaps 14.
Avianca 052 heavy, New York.
Good evening. Climb and maintain 3,000.
Advise him we don't have fuel.
Climb and maintain 3,000. We are running out of fuel, sir.
Okay, fly heading 080.
Did you already advise him we don't have fuel?
Yes, sir, I already advised him. We are going to maintain 3,000 and he's going to get us back.
As they get back in the pattern and circle the field and come back in again. That again adds to the traffic jam that was being created at Kennedy Airport.
Avianca 052 heavy,
I'm going to turn you about 15 miles northeast and then bring you back onto the approach. Is that okay with you and your fuel?
What did he say?
The guy is angry.
I guess so. Thank you very much.
These guys were out, and they didn't say we were out. And he allowed the approach control to vector them way out in the original pattern and 15 miles north of the outer marker again.
Flight 52 is instructed to fly a long approach pattern for another landing attempt. The plane is down to its last dregs of fuel as the crew waits for final clearance from ground controllers.
In their minds that they were being handled and taken care of, and they had enough fuel to go around and shoot the approach. But on the way, they were given a 360 turn because of traffic spacing. And then they were run way out towards Long Island and vectored all around, which was equivalent to holding for another 15, 20 minutes.
Did you get clearance yet?
Can you give us a final yet? Avianca 052 heavy.
Avianca 052.
Affirmative, sir. Turn left, heading 040. Climb and maintain 3,000.
Negative, sir. We are running out of fuel.
Okay, turn left, heading 310, sir.
Set flaps 14.
Okay, and you're number 2 for the
Approach. I just have to give you enough room so you can make it without
having to come out again.
Okay. We're number 2 and flying 360 now.
Avianca 052 heavy, turn left, heading 330.
The lights in the aircraft start to flicker, a sign that the engines are being starved of fuel.
330 on the heading, Avianca 052.
Once there's no fuel flowing through the pump out of the tank, an amber light comes on to tell you that tank is empty.
Flame out! Flame out on engine number 4!
Flame out on it!
Flame out on engine number 3!
Come to the runway.
The passengers can hear the sound of the engines beginning to shut down.
When the engines went off, I looked over to the lady that was sitting next to me, and I asked her to give me her hand. And I philosophically accepted, I might die here. This is it.
Avianca 052, we just lost 2 engines and we need priority, please.
Avianca 052.
Turn left, heading 250. Intercept the localizer.
250, roger.
Select the ILS.
ILS.
Avianca 052, you're 15
miles from the outer marker. Maintain 2,000 until established in the localizer. Cleared for ILS 22 left.
Roger, Avianca.
Did you select the ILS?
It's ready on 2.
When all the engines flame out and the generators fall off the line, a considerable amount of power is lost, electrical power is lost.
In the cabin, the screams, the crying, and then this terrible sound of the wind against the fuselage as the plane drops from the sky.
Avianca's missing due to the weather thing.
Yeah, Avianca 52 lost an engine. We're trying to find out why.
Yeah, we're no longer talking to Avianca. He's 15 northeast of Kennedy.
Ah, wonderful.
At Clipper 18, turn left, heading 180.
6.5 hours after leaving Columbia, Avianca Flight 52 is missing somewhere over New York.
Yes, hello. I live in Cove Neck in Oyster Bay, and there is a plane crashed in our yard in front of our house.
When I woke up, the first thing that I did, I put my hand over here in my back, and I was bleeding. I said, "Oh my God, we crashed."
Both my legs were broken, and I had, blood all over the place.
El asiento en el que estaba sentada la hija mía, sí recuerdo que
The
estaba
seat where my daughter was sitting was totally destroyed by pieces of steel that happened to have come from the wing.
pedazos de hierro que entraron del ala y lo
I found my baby Daniela amongst the pieces of a torn-up, twisted chair. And I picked her up like this, and she was drenched in blood.
Bañada en sangre.
Avianca Flight 52 has crashed on Long Island, New York, less than 17 miles from JFK Airport. From deep in the woods, medical technician Bob O'Brien can hear the survivors before he can see the shattered 707.
What I first heard was it were just some people who were crying in pain, but it was apparent immediately what had happened when the plane hit the mountain and just stopped dead.
It just fell out of the sky. That's how witnesses describe the crash of Avianca Flight 52. A strangely silent crash.
There was not a big fire here. That will make it easier for investigators to examine if there were any gas or engine problems.
There have been reports of lightning in the area just before the plane went down.
The spokesman for the controllers union says that Kennedy is critically understaffed, a problem that is compounded by bad weather.
Rescuers have not yet given up on finding more victims.
Lo primero que me acuerdo es que yo miro y
First thing I remember is that I looked up and I saw a priest. He was praying for me, and I was lying down on the ground. Right above us, I saw 3 or 4 helicopters flying over us.
3 o 4 helicópteros volando encima mío.
Managed to get up on top of the fuselage, and there's that door handle that says, in case of emergency, pull here. So I pulled that door handle, and that door handle just went, and the door came open about 4 inches. And then I was able to flip that over, and I could just see piles and piles of people strapped in their seats.
The extreme G-force of the crash has broken off the cockpit and catapulted it through a stand of trees and into the deck of a home some 100 feet from the impact site.
We couldn't get into the cockpit to get to the pilot and the co-pilot. All those chairs, they all just hit that cockpit door and just piled into that fuselage, and just all that added weight and all that inertia now just took over in the front of that and just popped it off, and it rolled to its left side and stopped up against the tree.
Come on, somebody get the back here.
I saw some cables, and I saw a big hole in the fuselage over the passengers that were sitting next to me, who were kind of unconscious.
And on top of me was this guy who was bleeding, a big guy. I don't know who he was, but he was on top of me, but I was sitting.
I pulled myself with those cables towards that hole, which was over the wing.
I started screaming, "Hey, help me out, help me, take me out of here." And then somebody, when they realized that I was alive, they removed they took away the guy who was on top of me, and they took me out of the airplane.
At that moment, a fireman was climbing on the wing, and he saw me, and he said, "There's a guy here," and he pulled me out.
Okay. 37 fire and rescue companies from Nassau County are quickly mobilized. The rescue is the largest pre-9/11 operation of its kind in the New York area.
That little girl was sitting up on the fuselage and she was crying, mi madre, mi madre. And that imprint of horror just was, you know, you just in your mind's eye focus right back in on, I saw mi madre, I saw her mother. And I know what that little girl was seeing. It was horrible enough for me, and I'm a professional rescuer.
I realized that my baby was dying, so I began to scream.
Please help me. I had the baby here, please.
The plane has crashed in the wealthy neighborhood of Cove Neck, near the home of the father of tennis star John McEnroe. Medics set up a makeshift triage unit on his lawn. When daylight breaks 10 hours later, 85 survivors have been pulled from the wreck. The lead flight attendant is the only member of crew to survive the crash. Of the 11 babies on board Flight 52, all but one are found alive. Among the dead are several passengers with drugs hidden inside their bodies. Known as drug mules, they're poor people paid by the Colombian drugs cartels to smuggle cocaine into the United States.
It became an issue later on. They posted police officers at the morgue because they were afraid that the drug cartel would come in and try to steal the bodies because they were worth $1 million apiece, and they were waiting for this shipment, and there were a lot of them.
Bob O'Brien scours the tail section for survivors and finds FAA investigators struggling to remove the aircraft's black boxes.
I grabbed the handle and just pulled the whole box out and took that out and brought that out the door and gave it to them.
Even as people are being pulled from the wreckage, the on-site investigation begins. In charge on the ground is Barry Trotter of the National Transportation Safety Board. A former airline pilot, Trotter became an investigator after losing his right arm in a motorcycle accident.
The condition of the aircraft was really astonishing to see that that much of the structure was left in the condition that it was in. It hit right on about a 28-degree embankment, and with the wings and all the other trees, it only slid 28 feet, so it hit and stopped instantly.
Unaware of the details of Avianca's troubled flight, investigators quickly find a valuable piece of evidence.
You could look at the engines right away, and you could tell the engines were not turning. So there was no power on the engines. That was the first big clue.
Trotter and his team examine the fuel tanks and find just a few gallons of jet fuel still on board. It becomes clear why the 707's engines stopped turning, but the question of who's to blame is still to be answered. In the community of Cove Neck, New York, salvage workers begin the task of dismantling the shattered remains of Avianca Flight 52. But there's still one critical question. Who is responsible for Flight 52 running out of fuel and causing the death of 72 passengers and crew? The answer will be worth millions of dollars and affect dozens of lives. At the lab of the National Transportation Safety Board in Washington, D.C., investigators are eager to recover data locked inside the two black boxes. The most telling of these is often the flight data recorder, which records critical information, such as the plane's altitude, airspeed, and heading.
When we recovered the flight data recorder and brought it to our lab in Washington, we opened it and found that the foil wrap was not hooked up, so someone had actually intentionally taped the end of the foil so it wouldn't fly around and put it back in the airplane.
Without the crucial flight data recorder, investigators rely heavily on Flight 52's cockpit voice recorder, which is found with more than 40 minutes of voice recordings of the crew and communications between the first officer and air traffic controllers.
Yes, sir. We are clear to land. Stand by. All set for landing. Below glide slope.
And it was apparent from the voice recorder transcript and tape that the captain was not understanding the first officer's radio communications that were being made in English.
Everybody wants to blame the pilot, but he may be the last person to make a decision, and the scenario which caused him to be in that position where he makes the decision was created by several other people along the route.
The captain asked the first officer about 9 times to clarify information or repeat it or to pass on information.
We are going to attempt again. Icing, we are in an emergency. Do you tell him?
Did he make a conscious decision to run out of fuel? No. He was sucked into a situation by the air traffic controllers where he ran out of fuel.
Once the airplane got into the JFK area, there was certainly a serious breakdown in communications on the part of the pilots within the cockpit, on the part of the pilots talking to controllers, and controllers talking to the pilots, and the controllers amongst themselves, because there were handoffs and some of the urgency was not passed on within the controller's system. So we had multiple breakdowns in multiple areas here that ultimately led to this accident.
Slow!
The cockpit voice recorder reveals a crew desperate to land the 707 in near zero visibility and in extreme wind shear without the aid of an autopilot.
In this case, the captain had a difficult time maintaining the glide slope during the approach with the wind shear, didn't see the airport, and had to make a go-around. That almost doomed the airplane at that point.
The information being given to pilots en route was a wind shear up as high as 1,500 feet. But their pilots on approach were encountering wind shear as low as 300 feet. And that wasn't passed on to the Avianca pilot.
This is the wind shear.
The crew of Flight 52 is caught off guard. As they descend below 500 feet and slow down, a violent vertical wind forces them towards the ground, nearly causing the plane to crash 2 miles short of the runway. Ironically, Avianca 52's lack of fuel resulted in no fire or explosion, saving the survivors from almost certain death.
If the flight would have found some level ground, it was conceivable he would have slapped the fuselage down and slid to a stop. With no fuel, there would have been no fire. And I think it's very possible that most of the people would have survived it in that case.
As the hearings into the crash begin, lawyer George Tompkins is confronted by controllers who maintain that the Avianca crew failed to use the word emergency, instead using the word priority to communicate their situation.
The government took the position that the pilot never declared an emergency, so no one knew that he had a problem. But saying you're getting low on fuel and saying you cannot make your alternate, the word emergency is not necessary to say.
Negative, sir. We are running out of fuel. We just lost 2 engines and we need priority, please.
And they thought they were telling them when they said we need priority.
Para nosotros en español, la palabra prioridad significa...
In Spanish, for us, the word priority means first.
Corre a mí, te estoy necesitando.
Attend to me, run to me. I need you right now.
No sé si es que...
I don't know if priority in other languages means that you can wait.
Que puedes esperar.
To me, priority means a priority. If you ask a child, what is a priority to you, what are you going to say? He doesn't need to say an emergency.
Avianca 052 only has 5 more minutes in the hold. You gonna be able to take him, or I'll set him up to his alternate?
What is his speed now?
I'm not sure, to be quite honest with you. Holding speed.
The NTSB concludes that air traffic's handling of Avianca 52 was proper, considering the information they were getting from the flight crew. Many of the passengers are shocked and outraged by what they feel is a gross injustice, that air traffic control is found blameless. Avianca sues the Federal Aviation Administration, which employs the air traffic controllers, saying they should have done more when Flight 52 told them they were running out of fuel. The FAA settles and ends up paying around 40% of the estimated $200 million compensation due to the victims.
If you listen and read the tapes, the transcripts of the tapes of each air route traffic control center along the route, and the final, the New York TRACON, New York Tower, Kennedy Tower, you'll find 20 places where this accident could have been avoided if somebody had done something differently.
Among the 85 survivors who escaped the shattered remains of Flight 52 are the Montoya's 2 daughters. Daniela, the baby covered in blood, is now a healthy teenager preparing for college.
The day just before the flight, we took a long trip to visit the Virgin Mary. This is a very important sanctuary in Medellin. Perhaps it was a miracle of God and the Virgin that the 4 of us survived. It was a miracle, and we feel blessed by that.
For many of the survivors, recovering from their injuries has been easier than coming to terms with the reason why Flight 52 ran out of fuel.
I had to learn to walk from scratch. It's difficult enough to deal with the injuries. It makes me very angry to think that a plane went down with 161 souls and had almost half the people lost their lives because of a word.
A routine landing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting our approach to the FW.
Turns into a sudden fight to the death.
You're gonna lose it all of a sudden. There it is.
A passenger jet mysteriously falls from the sky and rockets towards a busy highway.
Push it up. Push it way up.
Delta, go around.
It's gonna crash.
A mysterious force brings down a plane claiming 137 lives. In the wreckage lies the one clue that can stop it from killing again. August the 2nd, 1985. Dallas, Texas. It's a very hot day, even by Texas standards.
See you all tomorrow.
Temperatures soar to 101 degrees.
Rain coming. Should cool things down a bit.
In the late afternoon, William Maybury is heading home from work. The day's heat and humidity are having an effect on traffic at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, DFW. Roughly the size of Manhattan, DFW is the biggest airport in the world. It's also one of the busiest. The heat has triggered some afternoon thunderstorms at the airport, creating a backlog of planes waiting to take off.
American 631, you are cleared for takeoff.
Air traffic controller Gene Skipworth is in the tower today. He's been working there for 14 years. With him is controller Mike Porter.
Skipworth was not asking for help. Nothing seemed unusual other than the fact that we were starting to get busy and aircraft were starting to pile up.
One of the many planes heading towards Skipworth's control is Delta Airlines Flight 191.
Weather 6,000 scattered to 1,000 scattered. Visibility 10, temperature 101, wind calm.
101?
101 degrees, yes, sir.
Captain Ed Connors and First Officer Rudy Price are two of Delta Airlines' most experienced pilots. Second Officer Nick Nassick is the other member of today's crew. The crew is flying a 6-year-old L-1011 TriStar. The L-1011 is billed as one of the safest planes in the sky. There are 152 passengers and 11 crew members on board. They're scheduled to land in Dallas just before 6 in the evening.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Hope you're enjoying your flight so far. Traffic is backing up at Dallas. All told, we'll be about 10 to 15 minutes late getting to the gate. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable.
The delay bothers Chris Meyer. He's a frequent business traveler who's in a hurry to get home to his family for the weekend.
I've been down in Florida, Fort Lauderdale, for the last 2 weeks, and it was a Friday afternoon, and I was due to go home on Flight 191.
One of IBM's best-known executives is also on the flight. Don Estridge led the development of the IBM PC. He and his wife are traveling to Dallas for a family visit.
(963), turn right, heading 620.
En route from Florida to Texas, Delta 191 will be in communication with several controllers.
I'll turn you into Blue Ridge. It'll be about 0.
Every aircraft is guided along its flight path by a series of regional air route traffic control centers. They direct each plane's speed and altitude.
191, descend and maintain 10,000. Join the Blue Ridge 010 radial and inbound. We have a good area there to go through.
Captain Connors has some concerns about the route he's been given. He sees a storm cell along that path, and he doesn't want to fly through it.
Well, I'm looking at a cell at about a heading of 255. It's a pretty good-sized cell, and I'd rather not go through it. I'd rather go around it one way or the other.
I've had about 60 aircraft go through this area out here, 10 to 12 miles wide. They're getting a good ride, no problem.
Well, I can see a cell now about heading 240.
When I can, I'll turn you into Blue Ridge. It'll be about the 010 radial.
010, roger. We're going to hold you to that.
Captain Connors gets his way. He's given permission to fly around the storm. Once past it, he'll line up for a landing on runway 17 left.
I'm glad we didn't have to go through that.
Friday afternoons are a busy time at airports. The afternoon rain is making this Friday even busier.
23-9er down to 618.96.
The main priority for the controller on duty is to keep the incoming planes a safe distance apart. He wants them at least 4.5 kilometers from each other. That distance allows enough time for the violent air turbulence behind one plane to die down before the next plane touches down. Right now, Connors and Price are getting too close to the plane just ahead of them, a corporate Learjet.
Delta 191 heavy. Turn left 10 degrees, reduce speed to 180.
To put some distance between the two planes, the controller asks the Delta crew to slow to 180 knots.
Delta 191.
330 kilometers an hour.
Wilco.
10-degree flaps, please.
You're listening to Dallas 105 FM. It's a wet one out there, folks, so drive careful.
Heading home along Highway 114, William Maybury will soon be passing DFW. Flight 191 is now just 50 kilometers from the foot of the runway.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting our approach to DFW. Please make sure your seats are in the upright position and your seatbelts are securely fastened.
The crew begins their final descent into the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Attention all aircraft listening. There's a little rain shower just north of the airport.
Connors now switches radio frequencies and contacts a local DFW airport traffic controller for approach instructions. As the passengers and crew of Flight 191 prepare for their landing, a deadly force takes shape in their path. Critical decisions and missed information conspire against them. The crew will soon be engaged in a 47-second struggle, which will become one of the most important moments in the history of modern aviation. August the 2nd, 1985. The crew of Delta Airlines Flight 191 has been skirting a line of heavy storms between Florida and their destination, Texas. 30 kilometers from the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, First Officer Rudy Price notices rain ahead.
We're gonna get our airplane washed.
What?
We're gonna get our airplane washed.
It seemed like the closer we got into DFW, the worse the weather got. And we was turning it into the rain instead of going around it. And the pilots never said anything about the bad weather.
Delta 191 is still closing in on the Learjet ahead of it. Price and Connors need to slow down even further to put some distance between the two planes.
Delta 191 Heavy, reduce speed to 150.
Speed to 150.
9 kilometers from runway 17 left, Delta 191 is handed over to another controller, Gene Skipworth, for final approach and landing.
Tower, Delta 191 Heavy, out here in the rain. Feels good.
Delta 191
Skipworth tells the crew to expect a manageable crosswind of up to 15 knots.
Winds 090 at 5, gusts to 15.
Thank you, sir.
First Officer Price will be at the controls for the upcoming landing. Pilots and co-pilots routinely alternate flying duties. As Flight 191 is coming into land, William Maybury is just north of the airport. He's caught in the same storm that Price and Connors are just beginning to fly through.
Before landing check.
Landing gear.
Down, 3 green.
Flaps, slats.
33, 33, green lights.
The crew suddenly notices that they'll be flying into more than a bit of rain.
There's lightning coming out of that one.
What?
There's lightning coming out of that one.
Where?
Right ahead of us.
1,000 feet. I'll call them out to you.
All right.
We're not getting any bad warnings from the weather or from other pilots, which we rely on as they come through it. They need to report to us, and they do if they have turbulence or they have trouble on final or ran into anything abnormal.
The Learjet ahead of Flight 191 lands safely. Connors and Price are now less than a minute behind. Without warning, the intensity of the storm increases. The L-1011 is being pounded by a driving rain.
I knew we was getting ready to land, but at the same time, you felt the surge, like the pilots was revving up the engine for something.
The plane's airspeed is increasing for no apparent reason.
What's your speed?
Price pulls back on the throttles to slow the plane down and maintain it at the requested 150 knots. The plane is just 180 meters from the ground.
You're gonna lose it all of a sudden. There it is.
Then the plane drops rapidly. It's as though an invisible force is pushing it to the ground.
Push it up. Push it way up. Way up.
Way up.
Way up.
The crew is pushing the plane's jet engines to their full power, but can't get more speed or get the plane to climb.
So I pulled my seatbelt tight as I could, but at the same time, you could hear a pin drop. Nobody was talking. But I mean, it got dead silence.
As suddenly as it began, the crisis seems to end. The plane stops falling and begins to pick up some of the speed Connors and Price have been fighting for.
That's it.
But before the crew can take another breath, the plane drops again, rocking violently from side to side. And then it dips wildly to the right.
And I just knew we shouldn't be that close to the ground that soon.
Hang on to the son of a...
About 2 kilometers from the runway, it plows into a field and rockets towards Highway 114.
When we hit the ground, it felt like you was in a car running over railroad ties. It was real bumpy.
The crew somehow manages to get the plane back in the air. At that moment, Gene Skipworth catches sight of Delta 191.
He's gonna crash! Delta, go around!
But it's too late. The plane's engines slam into William Maybury's car on Highway 114. He is killed instantly. The plane hits the ground again, north of the runway. It's traveling more than 350 kilometers an hour.
I must have caught sight of him just at the last millisecond, and he cartwheeled into the tank in just an instant, and then, of course, there was fire, not a ball of fire, but a wall of fire.
It seemed like it was only a few seconds, 5 seconds at the most. I don't know how long it was. Everything was stopped.
The resulting explosion is so powerful that the rear section of the plane is blasted backwards, away from the fireball.
Then all of a sudden you look up and it's just nothing there. Everything's gone. You just see the whole big picture outside, like the plane just opened up.
Remarkably, the tail section containing the last 10 rows of seats is relatively intact.
People just thrown around on the ground. Some were clothes on, some without clothes on, some were burned. It was something that you can't describe unless you were there to see it. It is something that you will never get out of your mind.
Help! Over here!
Hang in there, help's on the way.
Then, as suddenly as it had started, the rain stops. It takes firefighters less than a minute to get to the crash.
And when I arrived on the scene, I truly believe that there wasn't anybody that had survived this plane crash because there was just devastation everywhere. What I had pulled up on at the time was the wing section, which is the portion of the aircraft that carries the fuel. So there was a large amount of fuel and a large amount of flames.
The front of the plane has all but disintegrated.
I knew I had to get out there. At the time, I was a stringer for Time magazine, worked with them on a part-time basis, called their Atlanta headquarters for this portion of the country. They said one word, go.
Firefighters need only a few minutes to get the raging fire under control. They then turn their attention to pulling survivors from the plane.
It wasn't until the fire started to subside a little bit that I saw the tail section where there was some hope of some people surviving. There were these two women that were walking through the smoke.
Ladies, clear the area! Get out of the way, clear the area!
and it kind of surprised me. So I knew that there was hope and that there were people out there.
Only 27 people survived the crash.
I had seen death before as a medic in Vietnam, but it had never been aimed at civilians, and certainly not on a mass casualty situation, and certainly not this suddenly. I could tell how bad it was. You could see and smell and feel the death.
We felt like we did everything that we could, and we were just, we're just pleased that there were survivors.
I was scheduled to sit on off seat 15A, and I told them that wouldn't be no good because that was a non-smoking section. I was a smoker, so I had to be in back. That probably saved my life.
Captain Connors, First Officer Price, and Second Officer Nassick are killed. So are 5 other crew members and 128 passengers. IBM's Don Estridge and his wife are among the dead.
In the tower, there was silence for probably 1 to 2 minutes, except for just an occasional transmission. But basically, it's just quiet, and you just sit there stunned and wishing you could do anything to take it back.
This is a monumental crash. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board arrive at DFW, determined to find the cause.
One of our field investigators would have been on scene trying to locate the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, which is, a very important part of the investigation.
Investigators begin looking for evidence of mechanical failure. They examine the wreckage for clues that the plane was not responding to the pilot's command.
It's essential in any approach or departure accident to establish what the airplane's configuration was, to assure that it was not a factor in the accident, or everything was normal on this aircraft.
Investigators turn their attention away from the plane and to the skies.
After any accident in commercial aviation, there are theories galore. A couple of them prevalent that evening. First, that lightning had struck the airplane. Secondly, that it had been hit by a mini tornado.
There's lightning coming out of that one.
Where?
Right ahead of us.
15 different witnesses, including flight crews, report seeing lightning as Flight 191 was descending towards the runway. The investigators have to consider the possibility that Flight 191 was hit by lightning.
Lightning is always something that you have to investigate to determine the possibility that lightning disabled some part of the airplane.
In 1963, a Boeing 707 was struck by lightning. The lightning ignited the fuel in the plane's tank. The plane crashed. 81 people died. There had been a handful of similar crashes since then. Key pieces of wreckage from Flight 191 are taken to the NTSB lab in Washington, D.C. Bud Lehner is the investigator in charge of examining the wreckage, as well as the data from the plane's cockpit voice recorder.
But sometimes it might be very difficult to find to determine where the airplane might have been struck by lightning and where the exit point was.
Lightning coming out of that one. Where? Right ahead of us.
If the plane was hit by lightning, there would be evidence left behind. A device called a static discharge wick is attached to the trailing edge of an airplane's wings. It redirects static electricity into the outside air instead of into the plane, where the charge could cause a fire. If the plane was hit by lightning, one of the pieces that would be visibly damaged is the static discharge wick.
Nothing there.
With lightning ruled out, investigators go looking elsewhere. They would soon discover the real culprit. It had actually been caught on tape. A Delta Airlines L-1011 crashes after entering a storm near Dallas. "137 people die. Investigators rule out mechanical problems and lightning as causes of the crash.
Nothing there.
The NTSB's Bud Lehner turns his attention to the plane just ahead of Delta 191, the corporate Learjet. He learns that it was less than a minute ahead and flew through the very same storm.
After we had passed about 5 miles from the end of the runway, we entered a rain shower, what we thought was a light rain shower, and it turned out to be the heaviest rain I've ever seen before or since.
In spite of the rain, Rufus Lewis managed to land his plane safely on runway 17 left.
When we broke out of the clouds, we were high and hot. So we had to use all of the runway at DFW Airport. We landed, were able to turn off at the end of the runway.
So why was the much larger L-1011 unable to land just moments later?
Delta 191 Heavy, reduce speed to 15.
To put some distance between Delta 191 and the Learjet, the controller had asked Price to slow his plane several times. When Lehner plots the bigger plane's speed,
then down to 150.
He finds that it was coming in to land at 150 knots.
Delta 191 Heavy, reduce speed to 150.
Investigators consider the possibility that Flight 191 had been traveling too slowly for a safe landing.
If you don't have a lot of extra energy, you don't have anything to trade in case you get in trouble. A lot of times in adverse conditions, the pilots, they add another 10 knots for mom and the kids.
Crews don't have to follow a controller's speed request if they think it's unsafe. Price did reduce his speed. He knew this plane extremely well. He had actually helped to rewrite the L-1011's operating manual.
If the captain decided that 150 knots was too slow, they would have told the controller it was too slow and they wouldn't have flown it.
Lehner consults the airplane's manufacturer and interviews other L-1011 pilots. He concludes that neither the controller nor First Officer Price made any errors regarding speed.
Delta 191 Heavy,
reduce speed to 150.
This plane should have been able to land at 150 knots.
Speed to 150.
Bud Lehner still doesn't know what slammed Flight 191 into the ground. But soon he finds the clues he needs on the plane's flight data recorder. It logs every adjustment pilots make to the plane's controls. The device also records external elements like temperature, wind speed, altitude, and air pressure. Whatever Connors and Price were fighting, there's a good chance it left its fingerprints on the flight data recorder.
This flight data recorder gave us several parameters we didn't have before. Engine power, longitudinal acceleration, and those kinds of parameters really enabled us to do a more in-depth analysis.
The plane's data recorder has documented a combination of rapidly shifting winds.
Then it shifts to a downdraft.
In a matter of seconds, the plane was hit with strong winds from the front, then from above, and then from behind.
There you have it.
For Bud Lehner, that sequence could only mean one thing: a microburst. A microburst is a violent shaft of air falling from a storm cloud. Back in 1985, few people knew more about encounters between microbursts and airplanes than John McCarthy.
If you're at the kitchen sink and you turn on the water and it goes straight down and it splashes out in all directions. And that's kind of what a microburst is, except that it is extremely bad news if you're an airplane flying through it at low altitude.
A plane first faces a strong headwind which lifts the plane skyward, then a downdraft which slams it towards the ground. Finally, the microburst delivers its most dangerous punch, the tailwind.
And you would get a rapid descent, a loss of lift, and a rapid descent towards the ground, and easily crash the airplane.
A plane's wings need a steady flow of air moving over them. That's what gives them their lift. By inhibiting that flow, the tailwind reduces lift. There's no better recipe for a microburst than the weather conditions at Dallas-Fort Worth on the day of the crash. It had been extremely hot all day, and hot air rises. When that hot air meets the cold, moist air in the storm clouds, it cools instantly and rushes violently back to Earth. A microburst.
It is a tiny thing, meteorologically speaking, compared to a big storm or a snowstorm or a hurricane. It's just like a needle in a haystack. At its maximum strength, it's no more than 2 miles across, and it lasts no more than 15 minutes. So if you look at that little space and time window, it's very small. And so the probability of hitting one is low.
The odds may be slim, but planes do fly into microbursts. In 1975, an Eastern Airlines flight landing in New York flew into a microburst. It slammed the plane into the ground, killing 113 people. Then, in 1982, a microburst killed another 153 people when it struck a Pan Am 727, taking off from New Orleans. It was clear that 136 people on Flight 191 had become the latest victims of a microburst. Investigators had their culprit.
Unbelievable.
And thanks to Flight 191's advanced data recorder, they could paint a remarkably accurate picture of it. The killer had essentially been caught on tape. But what the flight data recorder doesn't explain is how such an experienced crew fell victim to a killer
You're in good shape.
they were all trained to overcome. When Lehner compares the pilot's actions to the actions of the microburst,
Watch your speed.
he uncovers details of a fight to the death. A fight that the Delta pilots almost won.
Lose it all of a sudden. There it is.
He seemed to know what he was going to hit.
Watch your speed.
The increase in airspeed prompted First Officer Price to reduce power to his engines. Power that he would desperately need in just a few seconds.
You're gonna lose it all of a sudden. There it is.
When Price and Connors entered the downdraft,
Push it up.
they were less than 250 meters from the ground.
The captain knew the characteristics of a microburst. He'd obviously been given an introduction to wind shear and microburst characteristics in his flight training.
When Connors and Price encountered the microburst's tailwind, there was very little they could do. They had insufficient speed and altitude with which to maneuver. If a pilot encounters a strong tailwind at 3,000 meters, he can point his nose down and dive to pick up speed and generate lift. It's called trading altitude for airspeed. But that trade wasn't available to Price and Connors. They were just 150 meters off the ground when the tailwind struck. The only way for them to gain airspeed was from their engines.
Push it up. Way up.
Co-pilot responds, the airplane stabilizes. I can see that most pilots would say, well, we're through with that, and rain's gonna stop, we're gonna land.
Momentarily, their efforts seem to pay off. Their airspeed increases, their plunge is halted. But with Flight 191 less than 150 meters from the ground, this particular microburst delivered the ultimate blow. A fierce crosswind that forces their plane to bank dangerously to the right. Combined with the microburst's other winds, the crew was defenseless.
TOGA is takeoff go-around mode. And what it means to a pilot in that regime of flight is let's abandon the approach. We're no longer going to try to land this airplane. We want to do everything we can now to survive the wind condition that we've entered.
The skill and experience of the pilots were no match for this microburst. It was too big, its winds too powerful and unpredictable. The entire fight lasted only 47 seconds.
The pilots of Delta Flight 191 did their very best to recover from this situation, and it didn't work out.
Investigators were left with one perplexing question. Why had Connors flown into the storm in the first place?
Prior to 1985, the radars on board the aircraft were built to detect thunderstorms, essentially heavy areas of precipitation. They were not effective. They weren't even designed to detect the microburst. So those radars were essentially useless at low altitudes for looking at the microburst phenomena.
Microbursts are invisible, but they generally emerge from storm clouds. That's why pilots are trained not to fly into storms if they see lightning.
It's a pretty good size cell, and I'd rather not go through it. I'd rather go around it one way or the other.
When I can, I'll turn you into Blue Ridge.
It'll be about 010 radial.
010. Oh, Roger.
Captain Connors was not a risk taker. He was known as a cautious pilot.
I'm glad we didn't have to go through that mess.
It's hard to blame the aircrew. Their job is to avoid thunderstorms, and there's probably a forecast for thunderstorms every day at Dallas in the summertime. Which ones do you avoid? And it's a very difficult problem.
Earlier in the flight, Connors had flown around bad weather. Investigators can only conclude that he underestimated the storm in his path at the foot of runway 17 left.
When you're in a landing sequence at an airport like Dallas or Atlanta or Chicago, and you see other airplanes ahead that are landing uneventfully, you might get the impression that there's a thunderstorm there, but I'm going to pass through it very quickly, and it's not going to be a factor for me.
Airports like DFW have sophisticated systems in place to provide weather information to pilots. A thunderstorm at the end of a runway is the kind of threat they were designed to identify. But this deadly storm managed to foil those systems. As Flight 191 was approaching the airport, the weather at DFW was changing very quickly.
Attention all aircraft listening. There's a little rain shower
just north of the airport.
Captain Connors heard that part of the message, but then he switched his radio frequency for his final landing instructions. The Delta crew never heard the last part of this message about weather ahead.
There's a little bitty thunderstorm sitting right on the final.
There was an observation 2 minutes before the accident that there was a wall of water at the threshold of the runway. It's been my contention that that information would have been very important to the flight crew.
Radar readouts from the day of the crash indicate that the storm cell Connors and Price flew into grew out of nothing in a matter of minutes.
This is 2 minutes before the accident.
The readout shows the beginnings of a weather cell at the foot of runway 17 left.
This is 3 minutes after the accident. We have a new cell right at the threshold of the runway that wasn't evident in the previous pictures.
This explains why Rufus Lewis was able to land his Learjet. The microburst was just beginning to form when he was approaching the runway.
Many people think that there was a huge vertical development that the pilots recognized and they just decided to go fly through it anyway. And I maintain, and I think the evidence proves it, that That was not the case. They didn't recognize this new developing cell. They did get into the storm beneath the cell, but it was heavy rain. They weren't worried about that. Then the hammer fell. It was too late.
It's small. It's the length of a runway, roughly, and it doesn't last very long. So it's something that can happen so quickly that many accidents have occurred because nobody knew it was there.
The storm arrived at the foot of runway 17 left virtually unannounced. But once there, it attracted a lot of attention. Pilots on the ground, as well as trained weather observers, saw the worsening storm. But they all saw it too late to warn the crew of Delta 191. The storm did show up on a radar screen at the Fort Worth Air Traffic Control Center. But at the time of the crash, the meteorologist on duty was in the cafeteria on a meal break.
If the flight crew had had any idea that there would be a severe event in front of them, they would have missed the approach.
Investigators conclude that the Delta crash was caused by the pilot's decision to continue their approach into the storm. A decision that was made because the crew wasn't warned about the hazard. In 1985, there were basic systems at airports that could detect dangerous winds, but they could not reliably detect a microburst.
On the ground, there were systems called low-level wind shear alerting systems that primarily looked for differences of wind speed around the airport and on the airport. Unfortunately, these sensors tended to be spaced so far apart that a microburst could actually exist in between them and escape detection, or at least detection in time to warn a pilot of the threat.
But a microburst detection system to overcome this problem had been developed. It was being tested in Denver and working very well.
What we found out is that Doppler radar, which is on the ground, is incredibly effective in detecting microbursts. And in fact, it can detect about 98% of a microburst.
Conventional radar uses radio waves to measure precipitation inside a storm. Doppler also sends out radio waves. But by measuring the frequency of returning waves, Doppler can also calculate the movement of the winds inside a storm.
And if you look through the Doppler radar, you see a part of it that's going away from the radar and a part that's coming towards the radar. And if it's small, it's absolutely a microburst. It can be nothing else. So it has what we call an unambiguous signature of a microburst, which means we got it.
Since Doppler radar could see a microburst, controllers could use it to warn crews of their presence. The Denver research resulted in an important new system at airports: Terminal Doppler Weather Radar. When the system detects dangerous conditions, it relays a warning to air traffic controllers, who can then alert pilots.
Flight 236, microburst alert.
50 knot lock, 1 mile final, say intentions.
After the crash of Delta 191, the Federal Aviation Authority, the FAA, hurried to install terminal Doppler weather radar at high-risk airports. Dallas-Fort Worth was one of the first. The domes containing the specialized radar are now a common fixture at major airports around the world. But radar on the ground can't get the warning to the pilots fast enough.
We also have an issue of ground-based systems in that it takes time to communicate the threat to the crew. The system has to detect it on the ground. It would typically go to a control position in the control tower and be relayed by voice to the pilot, which can introduce a delay of 10, 15, 20 seconds, which could be very critical.
Planes also needed on-board microburst detection. A team from NASA began developing such a system by flying into the most dangerous microbursts they could find.
Here we go. Take it. Straight ahead.
By risking their own lives, they would eventually save thousands of others. Delta Airlines Flight 191 is the latest in a string of crashes attributed to a microburst. Since 1964, microbursts were shown to be the cause of 26 accidents. claiming more than 500 lives. The public is unnerved. Politicians are demanding answers. The killer has to be stopped.
The body count is building, and this particular crash tipped the scales as far as the federal government was concerned.
The crash of Delta 191 showed that seconds count when planes encounter a microburst.
You're going to lose it all of a sudden. There it is.
Increasing alert times
Push it up. Way
could
up.
save more lives, especially if a microburst detector was mounted right on the plane.
If you can provide the airplane with 10, 15, 20 seconds of advance warning, pilots push the throttles up, they build airspeed, they build altitude, they build energy. It's like money in the bank. By the time they get to the microburst during a recovery, they can survive.
Aviation experts had to find a way to give all pilots those critical 20 seconds. To develop that technology, they would embark on a high-risk, unprecedented research project. They would fly a 737 into the most severe microbursts they could find.
We did a very careful risk analysis of all the possible dangers that could occur. And initially, the first reaction was, you want to do what with an airplane? You want to fly it through a microburst?
In the summer of 1991, NASA modified a Boeing 737 and went hunting for microbursts. The idea was to identify onboard technology that could warn pilots of a microburst in their path.
The airborne solution brings detection right into the cockpit, so the pilot sees exactly what's in front of the aircraft, and when an alert is given, there's no time delay.
Ground speed 234.
The NASA researchers were testing 3 separate systems for detecting microbursts. Modified Doppler radar housed in the 737's nose, a laser radar under its forward cargo bay, and a side-mounted infrared device to measure changes in air temperature. Each of those systems was wired to banks of computers in the plane's cabin. A spotter on the ground could find a microburst and quickly direct the plane towards it.
Roger, control 515. We're rolling.
Roger, understand your roll. TDWR and after control.
Range. Range, 45 miles. Ground speed, 240. Here we go. Take it. Straight ahead.
Need to come left about 10 degrees, 15 degrees.
Well, when you spied a microburst, it was all business. It was how do we get there, how do we get to the right altitude, the right airspeed, the right position, when to begin data collection. So people were quite busy during these flights. But yeah, it was exciting. We wanted to find them, we wanted to penetrate them.
With every microburst, the 3 onboard detection systems were put to the test. Researchers on the plane could instantly see which instrument was doing the best job of picking up the microburst ahead.
Behind the aft flight deck, we had pallets of equipment where the radar engineers, the laser engineers, the data recording engineers could sit and ensure that each system was performing as expected.
Ground speed, 234. Dead ahead, maybe 1 degree to the left.
Let's go straight through this one.
Here we go. Take it. Straight ahead.
We started with very, very weak microburst. Again, we had the ground-based radar telling us what we were about to go into. So we started with very weak microbursts, gained experience, then gradually worked up to stronger and stronger ones. You would see the rain begin to fall, and you would feel a sinking feeling. It'd be a little settling, a little like an elevator starting down.
A few minutes here before we touch down. What do you see?
So any apprehension that the crew may have had initially about going through them was actually replaced later with joy at finding them.
Here comes the center of the target, right now. 242 on the ground speed. Wind's gone away. Look for a tailwind.
Watch.
Lost some altitude there, too. There, the wind's gone around the tail like 10 knots. Good strong downdraft in the middle of it. Just sucked 100 feet in almost no time at all.
Our good performance decreased, too.
We were about 850 and we dropped to 750. Beautiful.
The Langley researchers flew into dozens of microbursts over the course of their research. The project proved that the forward-looking Doppler radar was the only system that could consistently give pilots advanced warnings of a microburst ahead.
What we found was that the Doppler radars could detect an extremely wide variety of microburst.
Lightning coming out of that one.
If the crew of Delta 191 had a system to warn them of microbursts, they could have boosted power to their engines and started climbing before they encountered it. That might have given them the speed and the altitude which they sorely lacked when they began their battle with the storm. The Langley flight tests had, in effect, tamed the microburst menace. After the NASA tests, the FAA certified a Doppler-based warning system for planes. Today, forward-looking Doppler radar is standard equipment on commercial flights around the world.
The good news out of all of this tragedy is so many things have now happened, from radar to ground-based systems to airborne systems, and especially to training for pilots. We think that microburst accidents are a thing of the past.
If there is one crash that we can look back on now and say, this made things safer because we learned from it, it was Delta 191.
The changes made after the crash of Delta 191 have saved countless lives. Captain Connors and First Officer Price lost their fight against a microburst, but their struggle did manage to expose and disarm an invisible killer. New York City's LaGuardia Airport, March the 22nd, 1992. A commuter plane with 51 people on board tries to lift off the runway.
Rotate.
But the pilots can't get it to climb.
They knew they were in trouble, but they were fighting all the way to the end.
USAir Flight 405 plunges into the icy waters of Flushing Bay. 27 people die. For US investigators, it's an open and shut case.
This accident was not a huge surprise to us.
But Canadian investigators are stunned. They know the New York accident should never have happened.
My reaction when I heard about it was, my God, it's Dryden all over again.
3 years earlier, an exhaustive investigation into a crash at a remote northern airport had identified a killer and spelled out ways to keep it from striking again.
Certainly, if they had followed the recommendations in my report, the F-28 crash at LaGuardia could have been averted.
The LaGuardia accident makes one thing clear. The right people never got the warning. March the 10th, 1989. It's 11:39 a.m. at Dryden, Ontario's airport. Light snow falls as Air Ontario Flight 1363 stops in the remote northern community on its way from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg. The passengers stay on board while the plane is refueled. For flight attendant Sonia Hartwick and the crew aboard the Fokker F-28, it's been a frustrating day of delays.
Big, fluffy, white snowflakes at this time were falling gently to the ground, and it was very, very gray. And I thought, I guess this means we're going to be delayed again.
I can't see us making it to Winnipeg on time.
It's Friday, the beginning of March break. Already an hour behind schedule, another delay could jeopardize the vacation plans of many of the 69 passengers and crew.
There was a lot of families traveling on board with plans. Most of them were going skiing, and so they were very concerned about meeting their connections in Winnipeg.
Kenora Dryden, it's Ontario 363.
Ontario 363, Kenora. We've got quite a
As First Officer Keith Mills checks on weather conditions, Captain George Morwood returns from making a phone call inside the airport.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
And it won't clear till late afternoon.
Check that. Quite heavy snow. Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make their connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Temperatures hover around freezing. Visibility is decreasing. If the flight doesn't leave soon, it could be grounded indefinitely.
Dryden is a very small city. It's a very remote part of Ontario.
With a population of about 6,500, the isolated community lies halfway between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg. Harsh Canadian winters with bitter cold reaching minus 35 degrees Celsius are the norm here. It's not the place to be stranded in the middle of a snowstorm. Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer Don Crawshaw and his partner are escorting a prisoner to Winnipeg.
When we did a criminal check on the prisoner before we left, he came up as a violent person. So 2 of us had to go with him. He was wanted in Banff on a fraud charge, and that's what he was being brought back to Alberta for.
Hey, no smoking and seatbelts.
On.
Instruments.
Synced. Cross-check.
Captain Morwood uses the power of engine number 2, already running, to fire engine number 1. Morwood and Mills are both highly experienced pilots. However, they've each flown fewer than 100 hours in the Fokker F-28. The multi-million-dollar aircraft is the first Air Ontario jet to serve the remote Northern Ontario region. 24 minutes after landing in Dryden, Flight 1363 is ready to leave.
Inform Kenora, we're rolling.
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting airways to Winnipeg.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
An approaching aircraft's urgent request to land
Unbelievable.
gives Captain Morwood little choice. He delays takeoff.
Okay, 363 is holding short of the active.
We are going to be a few moments until a small plane lands safely. We're sorry, folks. This just isn't our day.
In the 2 years that I had flown with Air Ontario, I'd never come across anything like this before.
The Cessna 150 lands safely, clearing the runway for Flight 1363's departure.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time, 363 Dryden.
Finally, an hour behind schedule, the plane taxis to runway 29.
As we're going down the runway to position for takeoff, a blanket of snow was falling and I couldn't see the tree line anymore. It was like looking through a sheer.
Folks, we're sorry for the delay. Flight attendants, please be seated for takeoff.
At 12:09 p.m., Flight 1363 is ready for takeoff.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora, Dryden, Ontario, 363 is about to roll 29 at Dryden.
Ontario 363, Kenora, roger.
Captain Morwood performs a brief engine run-up, heating the engines to rid them of any accumulated snow and ice. Then he begins his roll down the runway.
When we're taking off, I'm usually very quiet and focused, meticulously going through a checklist in my own mind. What would I do in the case of an emergency?
E1.
The F-28 reaches its takeoff speed.
Rotate.
80 knots.
Our takeoff was very slow and sluggish, like a slow, sluggish person running up a hill.
Clearly, there's something wrong. The F-28 struggles to get airborne.
We cleared the trees. The plane started shaking.
I thought, oh my God, we're gonna crash.
That's when all hell broke loose. If you can equate to being in a mixmaster, that's what the plane felt like at the time.
There's this dip to the left and then dip to the right. The pilot's trying to get this plane up.
Then all of a sudden there was a power burst. The plane seemed to stabilize itself.
You could feel that the pilot's trying to get control of it.
But a few seconds later, it became a mixmaster again.
I yelled out, emergency, grab your ankles, get your heads down.
Grab your ankles, get your heads down!
And I kept yelling that, and then I assumed my brace position. You could hear people screaming and yelling. There's loud, horrible sounds. We are clearly crashing.
The pilots are helpless. 49 seconds after lifting off, Air Ontario Flight 1363 crash lands in the bush, 950 meters west of runway 29.
There was carnage of the aircraft all over the place. I didn't know where I was. And at that point, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm alive. I'm still alive, that this is all happening so quickly.
When we crashed, we came down on an angle. It ripped the right side of the plane open, and that's how we got out, or else we probably would have never gotten out. Now, the prisoner was still in handcuffs, so I reached over and I took the cuffs off of him there, but he never left me. And then we exited the aircraft.
There's fire all around, there's explosions. I'm thinking, oh my God, we're full of fuel.
Guys, come this way.
And I started yelling, come this way, for people to follow my voice.
Come this way. Come on.
Passengers scramble for safety before the fire spreads. 45 people survived the accident, but 24 people do not, including Captain Morwood and First Officer Mills. Emergency crews rush to the crash site deep in the woods. The injured are taken to hospital in Dryden.
I was very concerned because I kept looking at the wing all the time. I thought there was a lot of snow.
Well, I didn't notice anything wrong going down the runway. Like I said, it was just when we started hitting the trees, I knew there was something wrong.
Within 24 hours, a team of investigators from the Canadian Aviation Safety Board arrives at the scene.
You're going there, hopefully with the idea that you can find out what happened, why it happened, and how do you prevent it from happening in the future. We walked the entire path of the airplane to the threshold of the runway, and then we walked the flight path of the airplane right to the crash site. That was the first thing that I did. I wanted to document what I was seeing by photographing. When you walk in on an accident site like that, there are two things that overwhelm you. The smell of aviation jet fuel and the smell of death.
The trees just past the end of runway 29 give investigator David Rohr and his team vital clues about the F-28's failed flight.
What happened was the airplane went off the end of the runway in what we would call ground effect and just stayed at that height, simply clipping the tops of the trees.
Look at how these treetops have been clipped off.
It didn't ever fly. You've got 24 people that died. You've got 2 pilots that died and a flight attendant that died. And they died, for the most part, trying to do their job. So you really want to do them justice, but you also have to be fair. And if there were mistakes made, mistakes have to be fixed.
From the rear of the fuselage, investigators recover the F-28's 2 black boxes. the flight data recorder, and the cockpit voice recorder. The devices are designed to withstand temperatures of 1100 degrees Celsius for up to 30 minutes. Investigators are frustrated to learn that the mylar tape from the recorders has suffered extreme heat damage. It's estimated the black boxes were scorched by an 1100-degree inferno for at least 90 minutes, far beyond their limit. The data is unrecoverable.
That was a big blow to us because now you have to try and gather information and try and establish that it's factual by independent routes.
We were just about to leave Thunder Bay and they gave us 10 new passengers.
Investigators must now rely heavily on eyewitness reports to reconstruct the events leading up to the doomed takeoff. They learned that the F-28 began its day in Winnipeg and was scheduled to fly a return route to Thunder Bay and back with a stopover in Dryden. But in Thunder Bay, plans changed. The cancellation of another flight forced the crew to pick up 10 additional passengers.
And when they did their calculations, they realized that we were overloaded and something had to come off.
All right, let's offload some fuel then.
They ended up removing fuel in order to be within the proper weight.
Dispatch, Ontario 363.
So the flight was delayed an hour.
The extra weight of the new passengers left the crew no choice. They had to unload fuel to lighten their load. That meant when they arrived in Dryden, they needed to pump in more than the usual amount of fuel for the final leg back to Winnipeg. Roa wonders if the change in plans somehow led to a miscalculation of the weight and balance. Was the F-28 too heavy for takeoff? He then uncovers a puzzling detail. The plane's weight and balance form for the takeoff from Dryden was never collected as required. It burned in the fire. Roa is forced to use Air Ontario's standard averages to calculate passenger and baggage weights. The data, combined with the airport's fuel records, allows him to estimate the plane's gross takeoff weight.
We knew how many people we had on board. We knew how many bags we had on the airplane. And we knew what our fuel load was.
He estimates the F-28 weighed between 62,000 and 64,000 pounds.
And the airplane's max takeoff weight was 65,000 pounds. And so we came to the conclusion that the airplane was not overweight.
The cause of the crash remains a mystery. 18 days into the investigation, the Canadian government appoints Justice Virgil Moshansky to lead a more wide-ranging inquiry into all aspects of the aviation system that might have contributed to the Air Ontario tragedy.
The government was looking for an experienced trial judge, and preferably one who had an aviation background.
Moshansky is an experienced pilot with 13 years on the bench. He will work closely with crash investigator David Roa and aviation consultant Frank Black. The new team's first step, assessing the plane's technical systems.
The electrical system, the hydraulic system, the fuel system, all of these systems are looked at both in terms of what is their history leading up to the accident and what remnants are remaining at the crash site that can be examined.
Clues to a possible system failure arise when Sonia Hartwig recalls a troubling event aboard the same plane just days before the fatal crash.
I think it was Monday or Tuesday. When we took off, there was this smoke that filled the aircraft and there was this horrible smell. I thought, oh my God, we have a fire in the lab.
But there was no fire in the lavatory or anywhere else in the cabin.
They told us that apparently it had something to do with oil sitting in the APU system. So every takeoff that day, this would happen.
The auxiliary power unit is a generator that provides the power needed to start the engines. Did burning oil in the APU somehow cause a fire and ultimately doom Flight 1363? Roa searches the week's journey log for any mention of the auxiliary power unit. He makes a surprising discovery. The APU wasn't working on the day of the crash. It couldn't possibly have caused the fire. But the inoperative power unit may still have played a role in the tragedy. Investigators learned that it forced the crew to make a risky decision in Dryden.
We're onto the connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Normally, the captain would rely on the APU to restart his engines after shutting them both down for refueling.
But if he couldn't use his APU, he couldn't shut his engines down.
That meant Flight 1363 had to be refueled with one engine still running.
Captain Morwood is in a situation where he's got a hot refuel with passengers on board the aircraft. He's got to keep an engine running to refuel the airplane.
Hot refueling isn't against regulations, but the risk of a fuel spill makes it potentially dangerous. In Toronto in 1973, a maintenance person was killed when an Air Canada DC-8 jet was consumed by fire during refueling.
Hot refueling is not a normal practice.
Could the hot refueling have caused some kind of damage to the engines? The Dryden Airport manager, a former military pilot, suspects there was trouble with the plane's engines. He tells Roa he saw the takeoff from his office and heard a sharp, explosive noise just as it disappeared from view. To him, it signified a flameout or engine failure.
I thought, this is going to be a high-profile and potentially controversial investigation. And the only way to ensure that the truth stands up is to have hard evidence from the aircraft accident. And so we took the airplane completely and we put it in our lab in Ottawa.
Anything?
With signs pointing to engine failure as the cause of the crash,
strip it down.
Roa orders extensive engine testing.
Those engines were examined in detail for damage.
Roa finds the F-28's two Rolls-Royce engines suffered only minor structural damage. There's no evidence of an engine fire, nothing at all to suggest the engines had failed. With little physical evidence to explain the failed takeoff, investigators are back to square one. To solve the mystery, they comb through survivor and eyewitness statements. A common thread emerges.
They said in their witness statements there was snow and ice on the wings when the airplane attempted to take off.
Roa studies weather charts for clues.
We had very good meteorological information.
The charts show that during the half hour the F-28 was on the ground at Dryden Airport, visibility shrank from 4 kilometers to less than 1 kilometer because of the snowstorm.
And although we may find other reasons, for sure, snow and ice on the wings was a factor in this accident.
Sonia Hartwig tells investigators about an unusual sight during takeoff.
As we took off, I noticed that the wings just became a solid sheen of gray, shiny ice.
Investigators consult the F-28's manuals to study its anti-icing systems. They find that only the wing's leading edges are protected.
The aircraft had heated leading edges on the wings.
I wonder if the anti-icing system was working.
And the heat was provided by bleed air from the compressors on the engine. They found the valves that allow the compressed air access to the leading edges. And they tested the valve to see if it functioned, and it did.
The anti-icing system was working. But since it only heats the leading edge, it likely didn't clear ice that formed on the surface of Flight 1363's wings. Investigators suspect that snow and ice buildup, what experts call wing contamination, may have played a major role in the crash. To verify that suspicion, Roa and his team meet with engineers from Fokker.
Thanks for coming. Curious to see what you have.
Jack Van Hengst, who was the chief engineer, had extensive aerodynamic studies and data on the effects of contamination on an F-28 airplane.
Fokker engineers have run simulations of the crash.
They were able to get some very good data in terms of the performance of the airplane, simulating the type of loads, temperatures, etc., that the Dryden aircraft would have been exposed to.
Investigators make a crucial discovery about the design of the F-28. Because of the angle of the wings, a very small amount of ice makes the plane susceptible to stalling.
They concluded that even the most minute bit of contamination on the wing would disrupt the airflow and cause a loss of lift.
Well, that answers a lot of questions.
The simulations support what witnesses saw.
It just barely got airborne, dropping wings, losing lift, and then hitting trees, decelerating to the point where it broke up.
Investigators are now certain that contaminated wings caused the crash. But what's still unclear is why the plane was not de-iced before takeoff. Almost all airports in cold climates, including Dryden, are equipped with the technology to remove ice from a plane. But Captain Morwood never requested de-icing.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
Investigators need to figure out why. They want to understand what made him risk his own life.
Let's hope it holds.
And the lives of the 68 other people on board Flight 1363. Investigators dig through Captain George Morwood's flight records and work history. They interview crew members, searching for clues to his behavior.
Captain Morwood was a very professional, very old-school pilot. He had his view on how things should be done properly and what his definition of proper and professional would be.
He also was very concerned about his passengers. He enjoyed making sure that they got on their flights on time and got to their destinations on time.
You know, Air Ontario was a growing company. It was their first foray into jet operations. I'm sure that there were many things that Captain Morwood would have thought in his own mind, this is not how he would do it. And I'm sure at times he probably let the superiors know that.
Morwood's history shows he's delayed and cancelled flights in the past because of icing concerns. Roa is stumped. Why didn't he request de-icing in Dryden? Another pilot who was at Dryden Airport that day provides part of the answer. He heard Morwood on the phone to Air Ontario.
That is what I have been trying to tell you.
He was very frustrated, and he was really concerned about his passengers.
Morwood complained to the off-duty pilot about the company.
These guys. You want to guess my weight before I left Thunder Bay? 66 and change. I had to offload fuel. Now that... Right. So now what am I supposed to do? No. You figure it out.
When he left the terminal, he was observed by witnesses to appear to be very upset and very angry.
Investigators wonder what set Morwood off. They try to piece together the pilot's day on March the 10th.
This was the 5th day of a very long week for Captain Morwood. And he was the next day leaving with his family on a ski vacation.
Before his first flight of the day, he'd learned the plane's APU still wasn't working. And then, once in Thunder Bay, more bad news. After refueling, the dispatcher forces Morwood to take on 10 extra passengers. Now he must offload fuel and lose more time.
There goes the schedule. Let's offload some fuel then.
This meant Morwood would leave Thunder Bay behind schedule.
Dispatch, Ontario 363.
And Captain Morwood is the type of captain who didn't want to be late.
Now en route to Dryden, and an hour behind schedule, the weather forecast the crew was given of light rain and fog is no longer accurate.
And Captain Morwood didn't get the forecast of freezing rain coming into Dryden, which he should have had.
As Flight 1363 lands in Dryden, the weather was getting worse by the minute. The plane sat there for half an hour while snow built up on the wings.
I gotta talk to somebody about this.
Investigators may never know how concerned Morwood was about the weather. But there is evidence that it was on his mind. When Roa questions the fueling agent, he learns that Morwood did ask about de-icing moments before takeoff.
Is there de-icing available?
The fueling agent says he pointed out the de-icing ground crew to Morwood. The agent then offers a compelling reason that could explain why the captain didn't de-ice. Air Ontario had a policy prohibiting him from de-icing with an engine running.
The fluid can be ingested in the engines and then find its way from there to the air conditioning on the airplane and make it extremely noxious in the cabin portion of the airplane.
But if Morwood had shut down both engines, he wouldn't have been able to restart his plane.
Now, the only other way to start the airplane on the ground is with a ground-based air cart that can provide the compressed air. And Dryden did not have the capability to start the airplane.
The equipment would have had to be flown in from Winnipeg. It would have been a costly decision.
If he shut it down, he would ground the aircraft there effectively, requiring the billeting of passengers and hotels and at an expense to the airline for which he would be answerable.
Right. So now what?
So he was under a great deal of pressure.
No. You figure it out.
And I believe that the conversation on the phone would have been about that scenario and his displeasure with it. But he didn't have any other chance.
It's getting worse. What's the latest?
Quite heavy snow. Looks like it's going to be a bad one. It's still within our takeoff limits.
Well, that's good. We got a lot of people who want to make their connectors. Let's hope it holds.
Though the amount of snow on the wings was still within limits, it's what lay under the snow that doomed the flight. The fuel in a plane's wing can get as cold as -40 degrees Celsius. The frigid fuel cools the metal surface of the wing. When snow hits this supercooled surface, it freezes instantly into a barely visible layer of ice. It's a process called cold soaking.
And this, of course, is what's disrupting the airflow on the wing and destroying the lifting capabilities.
Tell them we're going immediately.
Kenora, Ontario, we're taxiing out at this time, 360.
The only reason that I can possibly think of that led to his decision to execute the takeoff was the fact that he didn't consider the cold soaking phenomena and the fact that those wings could still have ice on them.
Advise Kenora, we're ready to proceed.
And Kenora, Dryden, Ontario.
Perhaps not wanting to face the consequences of shutting down his engines, Morwood opted to take off for Winnipeg without de-icing his plane.
He must have concluded that the ice would blow off on takeoff. That is where he made a mistake, a tragic mistake.
But Mashansky concludes that despite his mistake, Captain Morwood is not solely responsible for the crash.
It wasn't simply pilot error. There were myriad of factors which were the cause of the accident.
One of the most important factors, Air Ontario's decision to let the plane fly with a broken APU.
They were deferring a lot of the maintenance that should have been done because of a shortage of parts. And then they had to scrounge around all across Canada with various F-28 operators to borrow parts from them. And this was a very bad move on the part of Air Ontario management.
The investigation determines that by cutting corners and focusing too much on the bottom line, the airline was putting all their passengers and employees at risk.
Because the F-28s were new to Air Ontario, there was this urgency to get one crew off and get the next crew on flying. This urgency to have them in the air producing money.
I came to the conclusion after a lot of thought about this accident that there were a lot of other hands on those throttles, pushing those throttles forward. There were a lot of people that were involved in the sequence of events that led to this tragic outcome.
This was a preventable accident, but everything conspired against the pilots.
I gotta talk to somebody about this.
Because Air Ontario management did not have a safety culture. And you have to have a safety culture from the top management down.
Knowing there are dozens of Fokker F-28s flying around the world, Justice Mashansky takes an unusual step. He releases a report well before his inquiry concludes.
Good afternoon.
It warns of the plane's vulnerability to ice buildup and stresses the need for frequent de-icing in winter conditions.
Even a small amount of icing would be disastrous on an F-28.
But 15 months later, it becomes clear that Mashansky's warnings have not been heard. USAir Flight 405 is preparing to fly from New York to Cleveland on March the 22nd, 1992. The plane is a Fokker F-28, and it's snowing. It's 1 degree below freezing. At 9 p.m., the jet is being de-iced for a second time since its arrival from Florida. In the past hour, an inch of snow has fallen and shows no signs of stopping.
USAir 405, clear to taxi runway 13.
The crew prepares for takeoff. Flight 405 is an hour and 45 minutes behind schedule when Captain Wallace Majeur starts taxiing to runway 13. Then, unexpectedly,
USAir 405, turn left into hold short of Echo.
Left on the inner to hold short of Echo.
At 9:07 p.m., Flight 405 is forced to wait on the taxiway near runway 13. Another 23 minutes pass. First Officer John Rashuba turns on a light that illuminates his wings. He checks the right wing for ice. He sees none.
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
USAir 405, runway 13, clear for takeoff.
Even though it's now been 35 minutes since their last de-icing, the crew does not request another.
Takeoff thrusts set. Temp's okay.
Everything proceeds as it should. Until...
V1. Rotate.
Just after the F-28 begins its rotation.
The aircraft had enough flying speed to lift off, barely lift off. The wings just could not support the airplane. They knew they were in trouble.
13 seconds after lifting off, Flight 405 crashes on the shore of Flushing Bay.
I don't think any pilot really thinks he's going to crash. They were trying to save the airplane right to the end.
27 of the 51 people on board are killed. Another Fokker F-28 has crashed with tragic consequences.
My reaction when I heard about it was, my God, it's Dryden all over again.
Within days, investigator in charge Robert Benson suspects that ice on the wings was the major cause.
It would be very, very difficult for either of the pilots to really detect ice on the wings, looking backwards over their shoulders through the side windows of the airplane.
Looks pretty good to me as far as I can see.
So the captain was faced with quite a problem. If he wanted to be de-iced a third time, he would have had to get out on the lines, taxi all the way back into the parking area, and meet up with a de-icing truck again.
Takeoff thrusts.
That would have put him very, very late, and it may have even caused the cancellation of the flight.
After all of this work, after all of the efforts to see it happen again was extremely frustrating.
There were no regulations in place requiring the crew to seek another de-icing after their extended delay. But Justice Mashansky had called attention to the dangers of long wait times when he issued his interim report.
If they had followed the recommendations in my second interim report, this accident certainly could have been averted.
He also had drawn attention to the limitations of the de-icing fluid being used at the time. Called Type 1 fluid, it's a mixture of antifreeze and water.
Those chemicals are designed that as you accelerate down the runway, that they'll actually shed off your wing, so that when you actually want the wing to lift and produce lift, that it's not contaminated.
Type 1 fluid is applied hot to de-ice the plane's surfaces. But it doesn't last long.
Type 1 fluid had a holdover time in their best conditions of about 15 minutes. Under poor conditions, such as freezing rain, it could be as low as 6 minutes.
During the Air Ontario investigation, Mashansky's team reached a stark conclusion about the effectiveness of Type 1 fluid. Even if Captain Morwood could have de-iced his plane in Dryden,
We're fired up, taxiing for departure, requesting airways to Winnipeg.
it may have made no difference.
Hang on a sec, guys. Is there a chance that plane can hold? We're having some bad weather up here.
Unbelievable.
Flight 1363 had to wait for the troubled Cessna 150 to land.
By the time he waited for this 150 aircraft and pilot to land, and then they backtracked and got into position, now they're in a serious snowstorm, and they are getting contaminated.
Even if Morwood had de-iced during his 30 minutes on the ground,
Rotate.
the delay may have been enough for the fluid to stop working. The plane's wings may once again have become coated in ice.
It came out in the examination of Air Ontario pilots that there was a dire need for training in terms of how the de-icing, anti-icing systems worked and how long your aircraft was protected.
As soon as our accident occurred up in New York, we of course understood that it was a similar aircraft, in fact a nearly identical aircraft to the Dryden accident airplane. The circumstances were similar in both accidents, and the Dryden report was a tour de force, which helped us focus our investigation quite a bit.
Justice Mashansky had released his interim report more than a year before the crash of Flight 405. His recommendations could have prevented it. Mashansky would soon discover that a breakdown in communication had cost the lives of 27 people in New York. During his inquiry, Justice Mashansky learned that there was another type of de-icing fluid available to the airline industry. It's called Type 2 fluid. It's thicker than Type 1, which prevents it from immediately flowing off an aircraft.
A Type 2 fluid is a much more gooey substance. I've heard it referred to as almost mucus-like.
With holdover times of up to 45 minutes, it keeps ice from accumulating, then blows off the plane's surfaces at takeoff. 15 months before the USAir crash, Mashansky recommended greater use of the thicker Type 2 fluid. Mashansky's investigators also studied de-icing practices at Toronto's Pearson Airport.
We got a hold of a film crew, and we waited and watched the weather very carefully until we found a forecast of freezing rain. And we tracked one aircraft which was heading for the Caribbean.
The investigators discovered an alarming gap in the time between de-icing and takeoff.
And from the time the aircraft was de-icing on the gate until the time the aircraft took off was somewhere in the order of 41 minutes. So there was no doubt that aircraft were departing Pearson Airport with a partially or largely contaminated wing surface. We then went to Chicago O'Hare. This was the first airport to actually put in place runway end de-icing pads. And it was very useful in terms of explaining to us how these had evolved, what type of de-icing equipment they were using on them, how they worked.
At the time of the USAir crash, LaGuardia did not offer de-icing at the runway, only at the gate. Again, 15 months before the crash, Justice Moshansky recommended the placement of de-icing facilities at runways instead of terminal gates. Moshansky also recommended that pilots not only inspect their wings from the cockpit,
looks pretty good to me as far as I can see,
but also from the cabin.
USAir 405, runway 13, cleared for takeoff.
Moshansky claims that his report could have prevented the crash at LaGuardia. But the Federal Aviation Administration claims it never received his report in 1990, and therefore couldn't pass the information along to airlines and pilots. But Justice Moshansky doesn't accept that.
My second interim report went out in December of 1990. It was about a year and a half before the LaGuardia crash occurred. So I think probably sat on somebody's desk.
The crash of Flight 1363 resulted in dozens of recommendations that could save lives. The crash of Flight 405 ensured those recommendations were widely implemented.
Well, there was a lot that came out of Dryden. I mean, the commission came out with 192 recommendations. It changed the whole nature of how we approach contamination.
We now have runway end de-icing pads, so they can get a final de-icing before they take off. This was something directly the result of the Dryden Commission inquiry.
Today, most airlines use a new type of de-icing fluid. Type 4 de-icing fluid lasts longer. It will stick to a wing for up to 2 hours. As well, air traffic controllers must now be able to tell flight crews how long they will be delayed at the runway after being de-iced.
Dryden is really the first accident that explored not only what happens in the pointed end of an airplane, but what happens within a corporate culture. It put CEOs on notice that they can't hide in the woodwork when an accident occurs.
Dutch manufacturer Fokker went bankrupt in 1996. Despite this, in 2009, there were still 55 Fokker F-28 jets in operation worldwide, mostly in warmer climates.
Nobody should ever lose their life due to a contamination accident again in commercial aviation, anywhere in a snow and ice environment. We've learned all the lessons